Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's Cheryl Marlene, and I'm excited to be here with you tonight. Well, it's tonight where I am here in Vermont. So I'm excited to have everyone come. And this is the first live event for the beginning of the year. So I'm planning on being here more often um, as we go along. If you have questions, you can type them into chat. What I'm going to do here in just a moment is open up the Akashic Records and um, and then take questions. I also have questions that have been coming to me from um, by email over the day, and so I've got those that I'm going to deal with too. So let's see. Let's just make sure some things are working right here. Um, and I think we ought to be okay. Yeah, yeah, it's all good. So, yeah, so let's do this. So, I'm going to open the Akashic Records. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to open the records of the founders of the Akashic Records. And that's like opening the records of the records. It's something I've been doing for, I don't know, 20 years at this point, I guess. And it's something I really enjoy doing. It's an aspect of the records that comes loaded with just this infinite sense of awe and wonder. It's the place that I really like to connect with in the records. So, so I'm gonna, yeah, I'm just gonna open the records and then we'll start with questions. All right. Um, so why I do that, you just think about what you want to know, what you want to let go, even though I'm not opening your records often, just the connection with it is enough to really you know, open doors for you. The energy of it is so transformational and so integrative that yeah, just the presence of it works. So, okay. My center with your center, our center with all centers, our center as the one center. I enter the realm of the masters, teachers, and loved ones of the founders of the Akashic Records and match our hearts and minds with theirs. Let us find through joy and wisdom the ability to open the universe and ourselves to greater possibility and deeper love. Eternal Source, fill our hearts with clarity and sacred power and show us the place of balance between us and the founders of the Akashic Records. Hear us now as we become one with the whole, and when we are complete, release us in love and admiration, keeping our energy raised. All right, then. So I have the records open, and so um, if you have a question that you want to ask, you can type it in chat for me. Like I said, I've got a couple of questions here. So let me see where I'm going to start. Let's see. Um, So I think this one. I think I'm going to start with this one because I think it's sort of right on the. Um, it's just so perfect for like where we are, like really getting into that. So the question is this: there's a lot of transitional energies happening in the world over the next several weeks. I think we can all kind of agree on that. What advice does the Akashic Records have for people to stay anchored, to stay, with themselves? I think that's a really good question to ask. So let me see what they have to say. Um, so, so what they would say is this: is that um, that there is emotion happening on Earth that is very much beyond what most people are aware of. And they tend to get focused on like the superficial, um, get rid they tend to focus on the superficial because partly because that's easiest to see, that's easiest to understand that, but it but the issue is that, um, what's going on is not superficial. And it has very much to do with a shift in humanity and how we, connect, energetically with the planet, energetically with one another, energetically with, um, the sense that that brings us into a place to understand that life is infinite in nature rather than, like, something that's predictable, something that if we work hard enough, we can, um, um, we can think that we can control it. A lot of the problem right now is that people are not realizing how much that they live within what the records would call a power over power under dynamic, meaning that we're used to dealing with one another through the power dynamics that someone is going to be dominant over most of everybody else, and that what you want to be doing is working really hard to figure out, um, who's going to end up on top so that you can you can create a connection there that helps you be able to get what you want and to keep yourself and your family safe. And the problem is that that's changing, that dynamic is changing, and we're shifting away from that. And it's hard to believe it, mainly because it's something that has been a part of human existence for several thousands of years, 2, 3,000 years, and we're not used to the alternative, which what we're moving towards would be like the power dynamic is power with and power within. And the focus there isn't domination. The focus there is very much about shared connection and thriving, in an environment where you have let go of this belief that if you work hard enough, you'll be able to figure out everything and control things. Um, and so practically that means in like an everyday way, as we move forward over the next couple of months, there's going to be things that where people have been really, really, really frightened and they don't come to fruition. And then there's going to be some other things that nobody really thought about and scare the bejesus out of all of us. And that's meant to be an opportunity, i- i- to begin, either to continue or to begin a conscious shift into, um, into like a new way of being. And the funny thing about it is that a whole lot of spiritual ideas and concepts, like, oh, like, well, just let's just go with that, um are embedded in that power over power under dynamic in such a way that it's not really about us individually learning about our worth and learning to trust in ourselves and learning to believe in ourselves. It's much more about going out and doing something that proves to other people that you're worthy. And so that's part of the, like, it's both partly the interesting thing and the challenge, which is that, um that, yeah, I mean, it's a challenge because there's a way in which it's significantly different than how we've lived and what we've thought of and what we've done, like they just said over the last couple thousand years. And so there's a way in which it hits our intellectual brains and doesn't quite sometimes doesn't quite make sense to a whole lot of us. But then there's also those of us who, and we're not better than anybody. It's just that something's happening in our brains and in our hearts that we hear when we hear of shift and we hear of this possibility of change and having the world to be like a better place where it opens it opens a perception within that life can be um like what brings peace is this ability to say that you're learning how to be in this shift instead of being in like in pushback mode where you um you think that the way to do all of this is to just basically stick with the same old, right? Like there's that saying, right? Like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result every time. Um, that's where, in a certain sense, that's where the worry and the concern and the fear comes, is because we feel like we may be doing the same thing again, but yet we're not. We're different people. We're in a different place. The world is different. The earth is changing. And so that means that there's opportunity, you know, just just past the horizon that gives us the ability to deal with this differently. Part of part of what gets you to that is believing in yourself, believing that you don't have to choose fear, believing that there's opportunity and that whatever fear does come up isn't about you failing or not doing well enough or, whatever. Um, it's about letting go of the demand for perfection and letting go of this idea that somehow you're fricking missing out, because no, that's not what's happening. You're there, you're a part of it. You're hearing that call within you to show up in a way that you haven't shown up before. And quite frankly, that's scary. That's, cuz you're not dealing with like thousands of years worth of spiritual ideas to be able to do that. You're stepping out into a place where you're understanding who you are from a spiritual point of view in a way that, you know, pretty much runs counter to a whole lot of what people say, we should do. And so it's it's an opportunity then to look into yourself and pull out those parts of yourself that are filled with light, because that's what brings to you that ability to move forward, even though you're not absolutely sure of what the path is. Um, because that's really the thing that really moves us forward, is to quit saying that we know exactly what's going to happen, because we don't. And the reality is we actually haven't ever. It's just that we've pretended that we did or we know. I mean, and to a certain extent, even just saying that, they realize, like they're asking us to do something we've just asked you not to do. but the thing there is, it's about being open to the possibilities rather than deciding you already know that there isn't possibility, that this is going to be a shit show and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I mean, there's some aspects to that's absolutely true, but it also is not true that that's the only possibility, that that's the only way it's going to be. 6 months from now, when we look back on all of this, what we're going to see is that there's a whole lot of things that happened that nobody anticipated. We're going into a year that is probably very much more like, the beginning of 2020, like in January 2020, the whole thing about COVID was just starting to come into people's awareness. Um, and it took a while, and so that's the kind of thing, and it's not like we're not trying to predict horrible things, we're just saying that the motion of all of this is beyond, because has time is becoming infinitely more fluid than we've ever experienced it before, and that's going to really influence and impact what we can do and how we do it. So if you're in that place of feeling like you've got to predict, or you've got to be perfect, or you've got to figure out, what's all the possible things that are going to go wrong, and then try to work on that, then you're pretty much just wasting your time. Um, because the more supportive thing for you to be doing is really believing in your ability to transcend the horizon, your ability to believe and trust in yourself to be able to do that, whatever that means for you in your life. So, I, yeah, there we go. That answers that. Okay, so I can see that I've got some questions here in chat. Um, let's see. I'm just gonna go in line here. So, how can I get rid of my limiting beliefs? Um, that's a great question. Um, so what and this might sound a bit on the simplistic side, they think, but the best place they think to start with that is first of all, is just to be, is to be aware of what you believe. Um, and and in that, like if you come across a belief and it doesn't feel right to you, right? Like you're like, oh, really? I believe that. Oh God, I hadn't really even thought about that. Is to ask yourself whether that belief is true for you in this moment, right? And that might seem like a simple thing to do, or maybe not even a necessary thing to do, but the point of this is that a lot of what happens with limiting beliefs is that we work really, really, really hard sometimes, right? To like shift how we approach things, shift our beliefs, open the doors to perspectives that we haven't considered before. And we put so much effort and time and energy into it that, whatever, a week later, a month later, a year later, whatever time period, doesn't matter, going back and working through that again seems like maybe you shouldn't have to do that, right? Like, or maybe it's like, i- if you do it, you're like judging yourself that somewhere you got it wrong. And what why they're saying to look at whether or not it's true for you in the moment is because that's how you track what works for you in the moment, right? So you're not anchoring yourself to something, like when you've worked at it really hard, and you um and um it feels like a lot to try to let go of it, or maybe you shouldn't have to let go of it, but it um it gives you the opportunity to 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 sort of, in one respect, challenge yourself, but in another respect, to give yourself the opportunity to shift, to change, to let go of what is a limit, right? And that's particularly true for people that have been doing personal growth things and spiritual development things for themselves, because you can get to a place that you think, oh, I've got it all done. And that pretty much is a limiting belief right there. But it's when you don't question, right? When you don't, you know, really look into whether or not in this moment something is truthful for you. That's really what creates the limit. That's what creates the obstacles, right? So they would say that really the best way to get rid of limiting beliefs is to question your, you know, the truthfulness of a belief for yourself and see where you're standing on that. I mean, it may be truth for you, and that's great. That's wonderful. You've identified it. But you also want to give yourself the opportunity to look beyond what you might have felt was, truth for you at some point in your past and is no longer truth for you now. And then it becomes, from, like, this is me, not the records, but um, it's the thing that really helps you stay, be in the now of who you are, be in the present moment of whatever is for you. And that helps you be able to feel more comfortable about realizing, okay, that worked for me yesterday, but that's not working for me today. So where's the point at which what's the point I want to move towards? How can I work with that? So yeah, so I think hopefully that's answering your question there. It's a great question. It's a good idea about all of that. So okay, so let's go to the next question. How does scarcity mentality affect our lives? How do we align our lives with a clear sense of prosperity? That's a great question. Um, so, so what they want to do to start with to answer that question about scarcity is, first of all, to propose the idea that scarcity is a myth. Um, Yes, they realize that there are things on the planet that have a limited quantity. But really, truly, what gets down to it is that it, most anything is not scarce. And the idea about scarcity is really more about, like, inequitable distribution than the that it's truthful that that there is scarcity. Um, Scarcity within the power dynamics of power over and power under is used as a way to reward, you know, the faithful. And so it then it, and it becomes, especially with in sort of the power over power under spiritual dynamics, it becomes the way that you can control people. And and especially if you can get people to believe that things are scarce, then they approach their lives from that perspective, like you're approaching your life as if things are scarce. And so what can you do, what do you need to do in order to be able to make sure that that your life is prosperous. And and so and and then part of the way that that gets reinforced, that scarcity exists, is because the push of power over power under power dynamics is that the number one thing for you to do in your life is to prove that you are a worthy human being. And so um if you go back to sort of the beginning of what they were saying here, which is that scarcity is a myth, and you're able to just, come to a place. I mean, and there's work and stuff that you can do about that. Um, but if you can start the work of letting go of the idea that scarcity even exists at all, period, that really then shifts your ability to understand what prosperity is. And it moves it out of the whole conversation between, like, say, scarcity and prosperity, gets moved out of the whole conversation about whether or not you're a good human being, right? Because a whole lot of the prosperity motion of things is that, if you're a good human being, then life will be prosperous. And if life isn't prosperous, it's because somewhere, somehow, you messed up, you failed, you weren't whatever. um, and so if you pull yourself out and see that the whole idea of scarcity is a myth, then you're also pulling yourself out of the judgment that if you don't have everything that you think you should have, or that identifies the status of you in this world, or however that is, then it gives you the opportunity to reframe your discussion with yourself about prosperity. And so that it's not so much something that you do to prove your worth, it's something that you begin to understand from a like an internal point of view, that that as you are, you exist within prosperity, right? Like, abundance is the natural expression of you, right? Like, if scarcity is a myth, that means that abundance is the natural expression of life. And so when you're able to make that kind of mindset shift, then the whole conversation changes into something very, very, very different than most of what happens these days around, like, say, prosperity or abundance mindset. Because if you start from the place of, I, I am abundance, then it shifts your perspective in terms of essentially what you can do with your life, because you've moved out of a false sense of limitation and a false sense of boundary. And in letting go of the boundaries of things, then how you respond to life and what you do or don't do becomes something very, very different than, um, than if you're living within the idea that scarcity is there. I mean, it really doesn't take much to look. You look around at a garden or a forest or a park, and that's abundance. That's what we live in. That's what the earth is abundance. That's what the universe is abundance. You don't go out and look in the night sky and just see, like, one little measly star, you see a whole lot. Um, we live within the awe of abundance. And stepping into that awe, that sense of connection, will fundamentally change your life. I'm gonna have to think on that one for a while myself. I'm glad you asked the question. Thank you. Um, okay, let's see. We got another question here. Um, oh, thank you. Um, Let's see. So the first part is, can you say more about the master's teacher's presence and its practicality that at times they may not be available to you if there's an incongruence of intention or match? So I'm taking that to mean that when you open the Akashic records, you're asking about the sense that when you do that, there's times in which they may not be present. Um, so what they're going to say about that is this: it's not really about an incongruence in intention. Um, it's more about um, just simply, um, you know, when you work with you like say like when you work with your Akashic records, they're saying, um, the first of all, the biggest issue is trust. Can you trust yourself to do this? Um, and part of the way that we as human beings deal with trust is we try to control things. So if we can be successfully in control, then we feel like we're going to be able to get what we want, right? Like that's in a certain sense, it's what turns this into sort of a transaction, right? Like if I do these things, then I should be able to get these things. Um, and so there, yes, there's a skill and a technique to working and opening and connecting with the Akashic records, but ultimately it's not transactional, even though we might want to think it is. So so sometimes in those moments where you're not getting the way, like you don't, like whatever the presence of the records isn't there the way you would think that it should be, can basically be us helping you step out of that transactional perspective of things. Um, and to maybe consider that whatever you're getting or not getting is actually exactly what you need, right? Because the records are always going to respond in a place of, you know, the way they say it with me is, um, um, deepest intent, highest path, which is about going places that you don't expect. It's going beyond what you know. It's going beyond any sort of idea that you have any control. So, yeah. So, okay. So that's what they have to say about that one. All right. So let me go to the next question. Um, um, so I'm not sure I understand. Um, so, so this is what they want to say about connecting with guidance. Let's just call it like angels, guides, the Akashic records, whatever. Um, okay. So what they want to say is that if we track back to what they said earlier about how there's this incredible change going on the planet right now, one of the things that's going is maybe under really direct change shift is our ability to connect with different points of multiple dimensions, right? So the angelic realm is a particular dimension. A lot of, like, say, ascended masters come from a particular dimension. Um, and it just kind of goes on, like all the like all the entities that you can channel with, all of the ways that you can make connection with different kind of other forms of guidance, that like all of that is about interdimensional connection. And all of that is becoming infinitely more fluid than it's ever been. And what they mean by that sense of fluidity is that the fluidity part of what's happening is that it's losing that sense of um duality, like the sense of, trying to put everything down into black and white or right or wrong or good or bad, or, those kinds of differentiations where it's either this or it's that. And so things are becoming more fluid. So they're losing that sense of duality and becoming, you know, both good and bad and both black and white. And guidance is very much a part of that shift and change. And so a lot of what happens right now with people as they're, you know, either they've already had experiences with, with angels or guides or whatever, their experience is going to be changing. And in one way, it's going to be deepening, but in another way, it's going to become both easier and more complicated because of what's available. Um, it's going to be more than we expect. It's going to be beyond. It's going to be a fun ride. Um, so get ready, they say. It's going to be it's more than we can even imagine, and it's going, and it's already begun, and there's really not much you need to do to like join the ride, except for be open to however it comes to you, right? So instead of criticizing yourself that you did it wrong, realize that what you're doing is you're intuitively shifting in order to be able to expand your sense of yourself and expand your sense of connection with um like with the infinite and the eternal. Yeah. So um all right, so it looks like we got another question here. Let's see. Acceptance of self and acceptance of community through the heart is the way forward in embracing our new agreements. Yeah, so the question is acceptance of self and acceptance of community through the heart the way forward in embracing our new agreements? Yeah, I mean, they would say, yeah, the short answer to that question is yes. um, um, so energetically, if you can, um, see, I mean, okay, so what they just said about fluidity means that part of what that means is that our ability to connect non-locally is becoming more and more profound in both in our ability, the depth of our ability, and the depth of connection that we can make, um, you know, within ourselves and with others. And so part of what it is that it expands the idea of community, right? Like, um, it wasn't too long ago that being able to do this on a video, on a video screen was not something that was very typical, right? Or it was more like almost like science fiction in a sense, right? And and it and while you might have some ideas or arguments that, you know, um, that computers are gonna be the death of us or something like that, but they're saying the what it is that it's symbolic of us expanding our connections with people beyond our local environment, right? Like locality means, like like people that are like physically next door to me or physically live in my city. Whereas non-locality is it transcends any sort of geographical idea, and it means that then community is able to connect within that fluid interdimensional sense, and and within that, what you find when you are afraid of it, right, and you let go of the fear, you can't control it, because we're much more used to thinking about controlling things in our immediate environment. You let go of that sense of control, and it enhances and deepens your sense of community, your sense of connection, and how you sense community. And more and more, the sense of community transcends those geographical lines, and it heralds a shift that's been happening for a long time. I mean, you go back to Mesopotamia and when they first started with the whole idea of city states, right? Like that's a sense of transcendence right there, of moving from what is going to be, how you define local, and then how you see that your local expands within what had been non-local, right? That's what we're in the middle. We're doing that. We're continuing that process. I mean, it's part of the reason why, you know we've had much more of a dominance of the body and the mind over the heart and the soul the last couple thousand years ago. That's what the basis of the human agreements has been. And one of the like benefits in a certain sense that you get out of that is, even though there's a lot of stuff that, like we're not all that happy about, maybe, but what you get out of that is this ability to begin to really see that your world is beyond, like the four corners of your house. That your community is able to transcend any sense of geographic or even time limitation, and become um, empowering to you to see that your world is your community, right? Like that it's not just my city or my state or my country, it's that the world is my community. And in that kind of shift, you know I mean, in one way it's something that we've talked about, humans have talked about for, I don't know, 50 or 60 years, maybe longer than that. But this sense of being a citizen of the world, I mean, in some respects that's what they're talking about, but more importantly what they're talking about is the energetic feeling that one person can have and how that ripples out and affects other people and their perceptions of what's possible in the world and you know, what's happening. Um, and so, yes, very much the heart is the connector there because the heart isn't doesn't deal with, let's say, local and non-local boundaries in the same way that our intellectual mind does. It's a different process. It's a different it's a different belief system, and and by opening the door to allowing yourself to feel the connection in that deeper way, it means that you're expanding, so that you don't have to, like, you don't have to ascend, you don't have to figure out whether you're in living in 5D or not, because it's the experience in the moment. It's happening, you're there, you're already doing it. You don't have to go prove your worth, you don't have to go whatever, do whatever, because it's already happened, right? Like, so much of what we try to do to placate ourselves with whatever crap we think is going on around us is to say, well, when I get there, right? When that happens, I'll be there and I'll be ready for it. Well, but like, that's always waiting for your ship to come in. And essentially your ship doesn't come in because it's there. You're already who you are. You are that which you seek. And um and so it really becomes more a an excuse to not be all of who you are than reality, right? It's, or it just becomes another way to judge yourself or to judge others. And the records say, enough of that. Just get over yourselves. You are that which you seek. Believe it, act on it, feel it in your heart, and know eventually it's going to end up in your mind. You're going to, it's going to be an integrated experience. All right. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Anything else that they would like to ask? That was going to have to shake some of that off myself. Um, um, so I do have another question here, and I think I'm just going to go ahead um, and address this, because partly because we just sort of talked about it, but it's about someone asking about all the, like, trying to understand the difference between all the dimensions, like what's the difference between 3D and 4D and 5D, and then, oh my gosh, some people talk about 6D and 7D and 8D and yada 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 yada. Um, so generally that whole concept started with the idea that what we live in right now is three dimensionals, right? Is three dimensions, height, width, and length. um I think in some respects, through the work of Einstein, you got into four dimensions because you took the three dimensions of physical space and you added time. So that for a lot of people, 5D, five dimension, is when you get into a high level of spiritual consciousness, vibrational consciousness. And um and that in order to get into 5D, there's certain things you've got to do to be able to be worthy of that kind of spiritual awareness. Um, Historically, within the spiritual philosophies and religious philosophy schools over a long time, several thousand years, basically, um, have had ways of defining different levels of existence. And so they think that this whole conversation about, 5D, let's just call it 5D, um, is one that is reflective of that history in the sense of um, trying to define, let's say, the difference between human consciousness and awareness and what's perceived as divine consciousness and awareness. And the idea that to get to any semblance of divine consciousness, um, there's something um, there's something that you need to do to qualify for that. And that's where they see the biggest problem. So it goes back to what they were just saying, which is that you are that which you seek. And if there's something you feel like you have to do in order to get into that next level of whatever it is, um, it's not that's not the way that they would approach it. What they would The way that they would approach it is to suggest that it's a matter of what moves towards you easily and quickly, and not about something that you do that gets you into that magical place, because that's you separating the reality of life from the reality of who you are as a spiritual being. And that's a really important thing to be aware of, because part of the shift that we're going in with humanity is that we're moving away from a dominance of the body and the mind over the heart and the soul, and instead we're moving into um, the integration of the physical and the spiritual here on the earth, so that you're not having to get up and go, like, you're not having to ascend to heaven to have to be the amazing spiritual being that you are. You do it here, you do it now. And it's an integration of body, mind, heart, and soul. So there's no hierarchy there. um, a lot of spiritual tradition has held, that to be spiritual, you have to do certain things. And what the records are saying is that we're shifting away from that kind of judgment, that kind of idea that only the chosen few, the certain people who do whatever it is that has been described to be done, are the only ones that are able to have that experience. No, what it is that the capacity for a conscious awareness of physical spiritual integration is part of all of humanity, not just certain people who've done certain things. We're all here. We all have that capacity. There is nothing that would preclude anybody from having a deep spiritual experience right now, other than belief. The belief that somehow you have to do something special to attain that kind of glory, um, it is BS as far as they're concerned. um, and it's you know, it's a lie, essentially. Um, so it's really about believing in yourself and understanding that a lot of what gets talked about in the spiritual community, like say with 5D, 6D, 7D, or whatever, is, in some respects, it's people grappling with what they don't know, but it's also, in some respects, the continuation of, you have to do something special in order to be able to have this kind of experience. And that's what they're going to say that they find issue with, that that's not true. Um, yes, you need to do your personal work. Yes, learning to trust yourself, learning to believe in the truth of who you are, believing in yourself is where that all begins. That's the work. That's the thought work. That's the heart work. And um and that's a path that's never done. There's always something today in this moment that you can shift and you can open to a deeper understanding of. And so it's not a destination, never a destination. It's the process of the journey, right? It's that you take the step, right? Like that old idea that comes out of Chinese thought, right? That the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, and the journey is the step, and the journey is this step now, and now you take a next step, and that's what it is, right? So there's no reward because you get to whatever destination that you think you ought to get to. There's the enjoyment, there's the balance, the harmony that comes from within you when you open the door to the experience in this moment, and the learning about your capacity, the learning about what is possible for you to do, and to know that that capacity is unlimited. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, I think I think that did it for the evening. Almost an hour. That's good. I want to. I think I've had enough. So let me close the records. In love and light, I thank the masters, teachers, and loved ones for their love, their attention, and their presence. Amen. 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 All right. The records are closed. All right, I want to thank everybody for showing up. I really, really, really appreciate it. I know some of you I will see again soon, and I'll look forward to it. I'll post on my YouTube channel the next time. I'm kind of coming up with different things, different times. But anyway, so I think this is great, and I love everybody, and I'm so excited that you're all a part of my life, and I'll look forward to seeing you all soon. So I know some of you are going to bed, so good night, sleep well. I know some of you are just getting up for the day, so welcome to the day. I hope it's a good one for you. All right, I'll see everybody later. You all take care. Good night. Goodbye. Good morning.